So Josh, thank you for being with us.
You people do work that really matters. Not that my other clients aren't doing work that really matters. They do work that matters as well. But a lot of you are closer to things that are more meaningful and that make a huge difference in the lives of the people that you touch. And so I love your mission. I love that you're altruistic and that you're doing the things that you're doing. And I hope that some of the comments that I give you today will be helpful in terms of helping you to leverage crowdfunding opportunities as well as other funding opportunities. Because really what I'm going to talk about today are some of the foundational things around creating a story, finding out who your audience is, and figuring out how to really reach those people who can help you achieve the goals that you have to help the people that you help. Just a little bit by way of introduction here. So I run this digital marketing agency called MWI. Actually, I don't even run it anymore. I've got a great team that's running it for me. One of those people is Jason Wong. He's here in the front. He's our managing director here in Hong Kong. And so if you have marketing questions, especially if you have marketing questions in Cantonese, you can talk to him and he can speak all about that to you. My Cantonese is terrible, even though I lived here for 3 years. I know about 10 words, and that's about it. That's about all I can say. So MWI is a digital marketing agency. We have offices here in Hong Kong, in the US. We just opened up offices in the UK. And we're expanding into China as well, which is where I live, up in Shenzhen. I've been there for the past year. I also am an author. I wrote this book called Chief Marketing Officers at Work. I interviewed CMOs from companies like PayPal, Spotify, GE, and a bunch of others. And I put these interviews together in this book. And this is relevant to some things I'm going to talk about later. I've also written in or been featured in a lot of publications. These are some of them that I've been involved with in terms of writing. And to clarify, I'm not a real journalist, though. This is kind of my dirty secret. I don't get paid by any of these publications. I write for free, and the reason I write for free for these publications is because of the exposure I get by writing for these publications. So they've never paid me a dime, but because of the work I've done with these publications and the exposure it's given for my business, it's generated millions and millions of dollars of revenue for my business. That's why I write for these publications. What I am doing with my writing in these publications and in my book, and also in speaking to organizations and conferences and such, is I'm looking for attention. I want attention from the people who fuel my agency, from the type of clients that I'm going after. Your goals are the same. So for me, attention equals success. If it equals success for my business, it also equals success for me as a journalist or a quasi-journalist. So I want attention on my articles. I want people reading those articles. I want people responding to those articles. And for you as a nonprofit, as an NGO, as a charity, you're also looking for attention from people who can help you accomplish your goals. Whether these are people who are giving you the funds that you need to execute your plans, or they're people who are influencing other people, or they're people who are helping out in other ways. Attention means success when it comes to crowdfunding. Now let's look at the top 10 GoFundMe campaigns for 2016. GoFundMe is a popular platform used by a lot of charities and nonprofits. Text might be a little bit small to read there, but we've got some of the largest fundraising campaigns here. You see Louisiana floods, Hurricane Matthew, earthquakes, floods, fires. And then on the other side, we've got these events like Pulse shooting in Florida, which was a shooting at a nightclub, and Standing Rock thing going on. And we've got a lot of politics, things like that. What's the common thread with all these crowdfunding campaigns? The largest crowdfunding campaigns of 2016, they're all news. They're all newsworthy events. They're things that the news media wanted to cover, and so those crowdfunding campaigns had a lot of attention being driven to them. And you might look at that and say, well, that's great. They've got a lot of attention, but what about me? What about my charity? What about my NGO? We don't get a lot of attention because maybe my cause isn't in the news. Maybe it's not the type of thing that journalists look at and say, oh, this is really exciting. But it's a real need. It's something that needs to be taken care of, but it's just not news. It's not the exciting, dramatic things that we see popping up in the news every day. If that's where you are, then you and I have the exact same problem, because I have the same challenge too. The kind of writing that I do is also not news. So here's an example. This is the type of article that I write. What CMOs need to know about SEO? Why do I write this type of article? Because CMOs, Chief Marketing Officers, those are the people that my agency goes after. These are the people who hire my agency and pay us money to do what we do. So I write articles for them. And I write articles about digital marketing. SEO is search engine optimization, and that's the type of work we do to help our clients. So I write these articles, but this is not news. This is not exciting. If you're a CMO, it might be interesting, it might be helpful, but this isn't the type of thing that you're going to see on the nightly news. You're not going to see this on the front page of a newspaper. It's not news. And so if you look at the traffic here, that number in the popular article has done nothing for my business. In fact, this article actually gives me problems because every time this concept of, or this topic of net neutrality gets back in the news in the United States, every time that happens, I get a bunch of phone calls from news organizations who want to talk to me because I have a different perspective on it, and they can't find anybody else who's willing to go on the news and talk about it the way I'm willing to talk about it, because I get hammered from every other direction. Nobody likes my perspectives. So every time this gets back in the news, I end up going back on the news myself, and I get interviewed, and I think, well, this is fun, but this does nothing for my business. And so for you, as NGOs, as charities, you could write content, you could create content that would be newsworthy perhaps, but it might not align with your objectives. It might not give you what you want out of that. Same way that this article doesn't do anything for me except it boosts my ego because I see that number growing and it's kind of fun, but it doesn't do anything for me. So how do we get attention? How do we get the right kind of attention from the people we want to get attention from? So let's talk about 6 ways to do this. And what I've done here is I've compared what I see works for me as a journalist getting attention for my articles, and I'm comparing that to getting attention for you as a charity. The reason I'm doing this is because when I was preparing for this presentation, I went out and I read 40 articles on crowdfunding for nonprofits. And the more I read these articles and read about what worked and what the organizations are doing that are successful, reminds me a lot of the process that I go through when I create articles. And so that's why I'm making these comparisons. And so number 1, identify your audience. The 2 biggest problems I see with charities that are doing crowdfunding campaigns that fail are they don't know who they are as an organization, and they don't know who their audience is. And it's clear in the way that they communicate with their audience on their website, on social media, in their marketing materials, that they don't have clarity as to what they do and what their audience does, who they're going after. You need to identify your audience first because this determines the messaging, the text, the content that you put on your website, on your social media, in your emails. If you don't know who your audience is, then you don't know how to communicate with them. And your audience might not be who you think it is. You might think, well, it's all rich people, right? It's people with money, that's who we need to go after, but it might not be. It might be the people who influence those people. And so you need to work to identify your audience. Now for me, as a writer, when I'm looking at my audience, you saw that article about CMOs, that's my audience, right? CMOs are my audience that I want to go after. When I wrote that other article about net neutrality, I wasn't going after the right audience. That was the wrong audience for me. You need to go after the right audience. Number 2, find your unfair advantage. Now what I mean when I say your unfair advantage is where do you occupy a niche such that nobody can really compete with you? So for me as a writer, I wrote a book about chief marketing officers. That puts me in a unique group because only 8 or 9 other people in the world have ever written a book about CMOs, about chief marketing officers. So already I've got a pretty good niche there. I'm recognized as something of an expert on CMOs. Now if I wanted to really double down on that niche, I could say, okay, well, I've written a book about CMOs and I live in China, and therefore I have a unique ability to analyze Chinese CMOs from the perspective of a Westerner. How many other people can do that? I only know of one other author who can do that. So that puts me in a really unique place and gives me an unfair advantage. When people come to me and they're interested in me speaking at an event or talking about something, if I can say, hey, I'm the only guy who wrote a book about CMOs and who is based in China right now, or at least I'm one of 2 people, that gives me an unfair advantage. Nobody else can compete with me on that. But if I went out and I said, I write about marketing, I'm just a really good writer about everything to do with marketing, I'd be casting a wider net, but it wouldn't be very focused because there are tens of thousands of other people out there who also write about marketing. So when it comes to your charity, are you casting a big net and saying, we are all things to all people, all sorts of great stuff for lots of individuals, lots of organizations, we want to raise funding from everybody? Or do you have a really focused audience that you can zero in on and say, we do this, this is a match, and if this is what you're looking for, then we're the perfect match. In fact, we're the only match for you. Find your unfair advantage. Number 3, craft your message. When you know who your audience is and you know who you are, then you can craft a message that really zeroes in on what people care about. So for example, there's a lot of talk these days about millennials as an audience and how you go after millennials. Well, if you know that millennials are your audience and that's who you're trying to crowdfund from, then you can approach millennials the right way. You can approach them through the right channels and you can have a message that appeals to them. Some of the things that millennials care about when it comes to crowdfunding and charity is they want to know that the money all gets spent on the end result. They don't like things like 30% of the funds raised go to overhead and organization and 70% goes on to the actual recipients of the charity. They don't like that. They like to see 100% of the funding goes to the end result. That's something that they care a lot about. They also like to see quick results. They don't want to see, oh, you give us your money and maybe 3 or 4 years down the road we've built this thing and now it's going to be great. They want to know that you're getting instant results. I put the money in, I donate the money, next week it's already in the hands of the person who needs it. They like to see quick results. Now, if your audience is not millennials, maybe you don't need to emphasize those points. Maybe you can emphasize different points that matter to your audience. But if you know that millennials are your target focus, then you can craft your message appropriately. One of the people that I admire who's really good at crafting his message, his name is Ryan Foland. He's a great speaker and he has this method called the 3-1-3 method. And this is the way it works. How many of you have ever gone to a dinner party, an event like this? It probably happened today, where you walk up to somebody and the natural question you ask is, so, what do you do? And the person says, oh, I do such and such, and they start rambling, and within 10 seconds, you're not listening anymore. Or you're you're talking to somebody and you're telling them what you do, and you can tell that they're not really listening to what you're telling them when you say, what do you do? So Ryan, his method is he says, when somebody asks him, what do you do? He says, it's not about what I do, it's about the problem that I solve. And then he's just quiet. He doesn't say anything else. And so then people say, well, that's different. Okay, so what is the problem that you solve? And then he says, it's the biggest problem facing XYZ group, whoever that group is. Let's say that it's orphans in China. It's the biggest problem facing orphans in China. Well, now you're really interested, right? You're paying attention. This isn't your normal, what do you do response. So then, of course, your natural response is to say, okay, so what is the biggest problem facing orphans in China? And then he can explain what that problem is. And then your next question is, okay, so how do you solve that problem? This way, he leads people to really be interested in what he's talking about, and he's crafting that message for them. So, for example, one of the organizations that we've done pro bono work for is an organization called One Sky. They used to be called Half the Sky. And Half the Sky, now One Sky, works with orphans in China. Now, if a representative from One Sky was at an event and somebody walked up to them and said, "What do you do?" and they said, "Oh, we help orphans in China." Okay, great, and you'd move on. You might be interested in saying, "Oh, so exactly what do you do?" "Well, we go into these facilities and we teach them how to do things that help these orphans." Okay, that sounds interesting. How much more compelling would it be if the response was, "What do you do?" "Oh, we help orphans in China." What do you do? It's not about what we do, it's about the problem that we solve. Okay, what's the problem that you solve? It's the biggest problem facing 2 million children in China. Really? Okay, what's that problem? These 2 million children are dying, and a lot of them are suffering lifetime ill effects because of things that they're not receiving. Really? Like what? Well, part of it's food, part of it's nutrition, a lot of it just has to do with human interaction. And we solve that problem for millions of children in China. Wow, how in the world are you doing this for millions of children in China? Well, we go into facilities, we provide training, and we're the first NGO ever approved to go in and train all orphanages in China, all 50,000 orphanages on our program that helps these children to get the attention and the love that they need so that they can thrive. And we have saved over 100,000 children from dying in China. How much more of a compelling message is that than to just say, we help orphans in China? That's what we're talking about when we talk about crafting a message. All right, create a community. Successful journalists have a community. They don't just rely on the publication to drive traffic for them. They're building an email list. This is the biggest thing. If you do not have an email list, and there's one thing that you take away from this today, please go start building an email list right now. It's your most valuable marketing asset, because that's the one thing that you own. You don't own your Facebook page. You don't own your Instagram account. Those things can be taken away from you at any time. They can change the rules, and you can lose that audience that you build there. But your email list, you own that. You can take it with you. It's the #1 asset that you have in terms of marketing, especially for crowdfunding, because as soon as you launch that crowdfunding campaign, you can send out that email and you can instantly get people donating it to you. So start creating that email list today. One of my favorite quotes about this is, create a community and sell them stuff. This is the rule right here. And if you don't think you're selling, of course you're selling. Even though you have a charity, it might be a nonprofit, you're still in sales. And go out and read all the sales books you can, because you need those tactics, you need those skills in order to do your job. So create a community, sell them stuff, or in this case, you're selling them a message. Number 5, target influencers or key opinion leaders. So there are people who influence your audience. Whoever your audience is, go find out who the experts are that your audience listens to, and talk to those people and convince them to get on board with you. Because then you can leverage the trust that your audience has in those influencers to spread your message. Number 6, newsjack. So this is a term coined by David Meerman Scott. He's a 10 times New York Times best-selling author. He's got a bunch of great marketing books out there. One of them is called The New Rules of PR and Marketing. And he coined this term newsjacking. What this means is when something comes out in the news that's related to what you're involved in, immediately you should be flying into action, and you want to create a video, you want to create a blog post, something that relates to that thing that's in the news cycle. And when I say news cycle, I mean you've got 24 hours to execute on this. You have to move very quickly. But you take that news thing and you write commentary on it, or you make a video that comments on that news cycle, and then you tie it into what you do as an NGO. And then you can do things like send this to journalists, and these journalists are scrambling for sources, they want information, they want to find people who are experts on that topic. And if something's going on that's related to something that you do, there's a natural disaster, or there's something in the news that relates to your NGO, you can get into that news cycle and you can get a lot of traffic from this. And you can use tools like Facebook's demographic targeting to actually target your blog post to journalists. And specifically, you can go spend very little money, get your article right in front of the right people by using Facebook's demographic targeting. I know there's a lot of detail here. Jason's happy to answer all your questions about this stuff afterwards. So these are 6 ways to identify your audience, find your unfair advantage, craft your message, create a community, target influencers or KOLs, and newsjack. These are 6 tactics that I've used to generate more traffic for my writing and leverage that writing to get more attention. If you use this with the content that you're producing as NGOs, then you'll be able to generate more attention for your causes. It will help your crowdfunding campaigns succeed in a big way beyond anything that any little hack or any little trick with Facebook is going to do for you. So focus on some of these bigger questions regarding telling your story, identifying your audience, these fundamental things, and then start filling in the blanks with all those little technical tricks. Thank you very much. This example, I like to talk about principles that are applicable to everybody most of the time, but also I want to make sure I get this out sometime today. So I want to talk about a specific tactic when it comes to storytelling, which is live video. If you're not doing live video, really look carefully at how you can tell your story through live video. You know, when I say live video, I mean live video on this thing, not like getting an expensive camera and a news team out to do live video, but doing Facebook Live, Snapchat, Instagram, any way you can do live video on this device and tell your story is going to be incredibly effective. Nicole talked a little bit about high quality video. I'm not saying replace high quality video with this kind of video. One Sky, to mention again, their founder, Jenny Bowen, she's a filmmaker. She makes these beautiful movies and films and pieces of video to showcase what One Sky is doing. And that's amazing. She should keep doing that. But One Sky should also be out in these Chinese villages with a phone, filming shaky video that's low quality, but getting that raw, authentic story of how what they're doing is impacting the lives of these people. Because this is the thing that's been successful with charities for decades, which is the authenticity and showing people the impact of what they're donating, showing the impact that a dollar can make on somebody's life. And there's no better tool that's been given to NGOs or charities than this right here to get that authenticity out there. This is a gold mine. It's the wrong way to put it, but this is gold for your cause, for your message, for your purpose, for what you want to do. If you can use this and use live video to tell your story, it's just incredibly compelling. And it's Facebook and these social networks are giving preferred placement to live video. So you do something on Facebook with live video, they're going to boost that. They're going to show it to more people than if you posted a professional made video and posted that on Facebook. So really make that investment to get your story out using live video.
And I was interested about Josh's point about Newsjack. I think it's a really great, easy, and free way to get yourself out there. But I'm wondering for organizations that might be working on politically sensitive issues, how would you advise us to go about that?
Especially with China. With politics, you always have to be really careful, right? Because you always run the risk of offending somebody. And especially the political climate today has never been more sensitive globally, it seems. So you do have to really take that into consideration when you're doing your message, and you have to be careful. And chances are that if you're participating in this newsjacking process, mistakes are going to be made at some point. Something's going to happen and something's not going to go quite right. Somebody will misinterpret something, misunderstand something you say, and it's not going to be the message. The key is not to back off of that and say, well, we're not going to do it anymore. It's to do it a lot more. Because if you mess up one time out of 20 times, then what you really want to do is do it 200 times so that you have 180 times that you got it right and 20 times you got it wrong. But people will look at the times you got it right and say, well, hey, they get it right most of the time, and every once in a while they might be wrong. They'll forgive you for those moments when you might not get it just right the way that you want to get it out there. But with being sensitive to the newsjacking side of things, you can also stick to just the facts and say, we're not going to take a political point of view, we're not going to get emotional about this issue, but we're going to try to report facts and get that in the hands of journalists. And so if a story comes out and you say, hey, we know something about this, and we have some data or a statistic, or even something anecdotal, some story that we can tell that's relevant to this, then you can get in touch with journalists, or you can write a blog post, you can create some content commenting on that issue, not from the standpoint of we're taking a political position, but here's some information that we have that's relevant to what's in the news that might be of interest to people who are following this story. And if you don't take a side and you just say, we're just commenting that, hey, we've got interesting information that's related, then hopefully you can stay away from offending anybody.